Hello and welcome to Women's Biz Podcast. I'm Annie Gibbins, founder and CEO of Women's Biz Global, and I invite you to get comfortable and listen in on candid conversations I have with fascinating women from around the globe. Business leaders, entrepreneurs, humanitarians, athletes, and a whole lot of regular people. Tune in as they let their guard down and open up on aspects of their business and life journey, how they measure success, and what they have learnt along the way. These conversations aim to inspire you to embrace opportunities and possibilities beyond the limits of your imagination. Reclaim your power, strength, and vulnerability. Stand in your truth and propel yourself towards the life you dream to live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Women's Biz Podcast. I always love this part of the week because I get to share with awesome women around the world. And today we are going to be meeting Victoria Pellitier. She's coming from Canada and she's going to share her story. She's got a couple of books coming out this year, which is exciting: leadership, personal branding. She's all about, growing herself, growing her brand, growing her business, helping others. And we are all about that. So welcome to the show, Victoria.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
It's wonderful to have you join us today. And I'd love you to share with the listeners. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Victoria.
So I am a career-long corporate executive, having become an exec in my early 20s. I made a shift thinking I was going to be a lawyer, to working in a bank and university, to then being recruited as an executive in the world of business-to-business professional services, where I realized I loved the complexity, I loved the leadership. So I never went back to law school. And then I'm also a public speaker. I sit on multiple boards and do a little bit of coaching on the side. And then outside of that, I'm a wife. I'm a mom to 2 kids and 1 fur baby, fitness fanatic, foodie, wine lover, avid traveler, and people watcher.
I love that description. I always love it when people share about themselves because that's it. We are such women of so many hats. We're just juggling different things, and that's it. We bring our whole selves to the table all the time. That's right. Even those little fur babies who sometimes are even more special than our kitties who can challenge us. But no, we love them all. Now, you've got so much happening though, and I think this is a really good discussion for the podcast today too, of how do you manage all of those things, because one of the big things in business is to stay focused, to say, like basic principles is stay so niche that it is just crystal clear for everybody else to see what you're doing. And then suddenly you're just like, yeah, you're on boards, you're working with businesses, you're doing this, you're doing that. How does that work for you? And how do you manage that multitasking sort of situation?
Well, I'm a big believer that where there's conviction, there is capacity. And so for the things that bring me great personal or professional joy or value, or again, I've got conviction around, I make space and time for that. So that's 1. 2, I live by one of my social media hashtags that I sign off with that is very close to just my philosophy is no excuses. And, so I'll tell people, particularly those who are looking to start their own business or do something on the side, there's your 9 to 5 and then your 5 to 9. And we all know that there's no real 9 to 5 jobs. However, what I mean by that is we have a choice in terms of how we're going to spend that time. Yes. So, for me, that's not Netflixing all the time. It's about finding, time to do all of the things that, again, bring me joy, or my children or my family, or for me personally. Also, I've been very good at establishing boundaries. And for that means saying no to the things that, again, don't bring me joy or value, and also being very good at learning how to delegate and to outsource. And lastly, I'd say, Annie, I've gotten very good at having it all, not always at the same time, and recognizing that there's compromises and trade-offs that I will make.
Beautifully said. I hope our listeners are taking notes on those 3 points, because they are actually keys to success, right? It's knowing or getting brave enough to say no, Like that's hard. That's a journey because often in that earlier stages of our career development, we're like going, oh, okay, yes, I'll be available 24/7, pick me, things like that. And while, it can be that you don't miss an opportunity, it also means that you can burn out and lose focus in those priorities that you've got. So I love that you actually started with that. Delegating, so key, absolutely. And when it said it doesn't bring you joy, that's true because other things, a lot of what you shared there was time management and intentional action. And so that actually is one of the key secrets to our listeners that, it's about saying, yeah, that's right. Those fur babies, those kids, those partners, those holidays, those everything actually are a part of that success formula. Are you a woman who sets your diary with the key non-negotiables at the beginning and then add your business around that? Or how do you actually approach that planning?
I do, absolutely. So as I said in my opening, I'm a fitness fanatic. I work out 6 days a week.
Yeah.
So for me, that's in my calendar. I blocked my calendar actually from 7 to 9 a.m. because what I found, unless I'm in a global role and sometimes I need to take those early calls, but then it becomes an exception. What I found was people were booking me for early morning meetings all the time. And I'm like, no, I'm at the gym and then I need to shower and change and get ready to be presentable for the rest of the day. And so that'll be one. The other is I'm block out 2 30-minute slots throughout the day just to respond to emails because otherwise I'm back to back to back.
Yep.
Again, managing my time so that I can spend my evenings in a very different way. And so those are put in as non-negotiables, or my assistant will know that, there's things that can flex and move around, but there's some things that absolutely there to stick. Even to be honest, I do a lot of media work and I'm very clear around when I'm going to do that. I try and hold sacred the time that I'm going to have on the evenings and weekends. So I'm not constantly, recording and doing those things then.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. I love that model. And that's role modeling for those of you watching and listening in today. So important. And I love that principle too of actually blocking out time to do the emails and other things. So many people go, oh, I just go through the day and just keep watching it and it pops in. And it massively reduces your productivity. So many factors there. So I'd love to take you back to that bold decision when you decided to leave law. Right? That's a huge moment. And there'll be many listeners who are going, oh my gosh, I was on one path and then I realized that it wasn't going to bring me joy, but it is so hard to do that. So how did you actually approach that? And was it just like no regrets? I just knew it so clearly, or was it like a real struggle and there was real impact from that?
It was a bold move. I mean, I had thought since childhood, like I think I was 11 when I declared that I was going to be a lawyer. And so now there were a few things. So while I was in university, I am near the end of it. So I don't know if it's the same where you are, but in Canada and in the US, you need to have an undergraduate degree before going to law school. And
Right.
so I was at the end of my undergrad and I shadowed a lawyer for a week or so. And I was kind of like, oh, that was really boring. And I was enjoying the work that I was doing. I worked throughout university and they promoted me. And I decided to shelve what I thought was law school for a year while I pursued the promotion and cross-country move that the bank I worked for had given to me. And I didn't articulate it the way I do now around doing things that bring me joy or bring me value. But I think I knew back then I loved the work that I was doing in the corporate world. I was leading teams. It was on the very, very early days of digital transformation, so much so that the bank didn't even call it digital transformation, but early days of being involved in technology and the complexity that I found in the business world. So my choice was to follow what was creating challenge and opportunity and growth for me. And quite frankly, I really loved doing at that point. And then it was an easy decision to actually never pursue law school because I loved what I was doing.
Yeah. Oh, I absolutely love that because, some people it can be just a massive struggle of one way or the other. I love that you actually just really knew early that you had to just lean into what what does interest you, stimulate you. Things like tech, things like leadership. You're obviously growing rapidly as a leader, running teams, things like that. And it's not that you can't do that in law, but like they're actually quite opposite sort of professions, if you like, unless you suddenly get into the courtroom and you're doing lots of public sort of showmanship, if you like. A lot of law is behind the scenes, private work. And so it's almost like a personality profile. You're interesting choice to actually go that path. Were you supported as a woman to grow in the bank, in tech, and then in business? Did you find any obstacles in your journey because of gender?
I think I'm not a big fan of fake it till you make it, except when it comes to confidence. And rightfully or wrongfully so, competence is often measured by confidence. And so I think I was given opportunities because of a strong work ethic, because of strong performance and confidence. I was a young executive. My first C-suite job was at age 24. I was also a brand new mother. And a lot had to do with, again, performance and experience in the bank, and the confidence I brought. But what I did see, not only in that first role, so I was the youngest executive by at least 2 decades, the only woman. And sadly, the needle hasn't moved. I think it's as much as it's needed to.
Yeah.
We need to look at the Fortune 500 companies, only 10% of the CEOs are women.
Yeah.
And even a number of years ago, working for a large technology company, I was leading a large strategy session and walked into one of our larger boardrooms, myself, one other woman, and 40 men.
Yeah.
And so I've grown accustomed to it, but it's why I'm very actively advocating and making change around diversity in the workforce. But how it's also negatively impacted me, besides being one of the only or the only, is around how I chose to show up. So early in my career, all business, all the time. I'm not going to show you that I'm vulnerable. I'm not going to show you that I'm emotional. I got given the nickname as the Iron Maiden. And Annie, that is not who I am. I am like, I cry at the Humane Society commercials on television, right? Like I'm soft and mushy and very quick to emotion and incredibly caring. But as a woman, I didn't want to be questioned for showing up with that in the workplace. And also conversely, because I am very strong, I am bold, I have no problem. For me, there's no meeting after the meeting. We put all of our cards on the table. I am radically candid. So I also get given names that as the B word or, aggressive versus assertive or things like that, that my male counterparts don't experience in the same way that I do.
It's so true, isn't it? That for men, it's like that's just confident male behavior, right? They'll see that as I'm just doing my job well. Whereas when they see women showing up with this same, confidence, just ability to own their space, be able to have an opinion, be able to progress things, be able to not get taken for granted, it can be a result in, instead of saying you're just fabulous at your job, you're a powerhouse. That's a nice word, you're a change maker, to actually be called, a B or a Iron Maiden, it's like, oh my goodness, makes me think of Margaret Thatcher.
Yes,
the
that's
other
right.
Iron Maiden. I wonder if she thought she was an Iron Maiden or she was saying the same things. Who's to say? Who's to say? So you've pushed through this, and I want other women, particularly listening and watching this show, to really appreciate that this is what pioneering women, and I'll call yourself a pioneer. I've certainly been in my space. I've had those situations, going for an interview and there's 20 men in the boardroom interviewing me and asking me a question of, well, how are you going to manage your family if you get this role? It's like, that's happened to me, and so it's confronting, and you've really got to back yourself and you've got to just keep showing up. And I love what you referred to there. You're actually aware that you were shifting the dial. you're moving that needle in gender equality, which is so important because we need women like you being out there going, I'm actually aware of the stage I am in history, and realize that I am one of those women who are influencing change in that space. So I just want to really honor you for doing that. It's so exciting. Now you've got a couple of books then that where you're at the moment, you're like, well, here's an opportunity. You've got one, I think, on personal branding, one coming out on leadership. What's your opportunity there? First of all, why are you writing those books? Why do they need to come into being? And what's your opportunity as this powerhouse change manager to be able to, influence others as they're doing their journey?
Well, I decided to do it. I'd always planned I have one book that's co-authored. I decided that I was going to author another book. I'm in career transition from my C-suite role. I still do my speaking and other work on the side. And I talked about conviction and capacity. So I had a conviction to do it. I now had capacity. So I decided that I would write the book. And I couldn't decide between the two topics because they're ones I speak on a lot and I do coaching around. And so I decided, why not? Let's do both. And the personal branding one for me, I attribute actually a lot of my career success to personal branding. And I see so many people getting it wrong or stalled. They stop at the first of what I believe are sort of four components: what I do, what am I known for, subject matter expertise, and never get into storytelling. Who am I? Interests, values, passions. The third one, what makes me different from other people? I said radical candor. That's one of those things in business that makes me different. And the last is around legacy and impact. And so I'm seeing people gaming the system on LinkedIn. And I say gaming, I understand the machinations to, have posts get more likes. And sometimes I'm in some of these networking groups and people ask for likes. And I'm like, but do you have a brand? Do you understand why are you doing it?
Yes.
And have you curated, it's the CEO of Brand You, develop the narrative that you want people to know about you. And for me, on my tombstone, it's not going to talk about sales, revenue, and gross profit that I've delivered for the companies I work for. I want it to be around everything from raising two really good humans to the fact that I made the workplaces, communities, and world at large a better place than when I came into it, and all the pieces around that. So that's why I decided to write that one. And then the leadership one is because I've seen just a transformation like COVID really did, and working from home. And I don't like the social headlines of great resignation and quiet quitting, but employees are demanding something different. And as leaders, we need to be doing things differently. So in that book, I actually tell a journey of how I got it wrong. Iron Maiden was actually how I presented. That's not people feared me. They wouldn't have followed me. So talk about that journey through to the evolution towards being known as the turtle, which is a tough exterior, but all soft in the inside, and figuring out how to, with that kind of authenticity and whole human leadership approach, bring people along the journey who want to, and that actually delivers better business results. So that's why I've written those two books. I'm hoping to share the failures I've had and prevent other people from doing the same thing, but also the lessons I've learned over 30 years in the corporate world, 20 something as an executive.
I think it's so important to share those learnings, so a lot of books, it's like it's information, it can, help others, but it's a bit too, do this and you'll be successful. I think, I've learned more in my life of what I don't like from other people's experiences. It doesn't mean that'll happen for me, but I had to actually go, oh, okay, so this extends my view on this is a possibility. This could happen. And why did it happen to them? And could that happen to me? And so that application is so important. And I also think it's so important to be having books and to have resources coming out in the current context, because the world has changed. Everyone going for a role now, it's not going to be a 9 till 5 at the office. Not many jobs are still doing that. I look at most, even corporate roles that are advertised on LinkedIn will be, hybrid. They'll be hybrid because they'll appreciate that this modern society is now going, okay, well, I'm expecting to go into the office 2 to 3 days a week, if necessary. Some roles not necessary at all. You know, if you've been in tech, I'm feeling for those tech people going, why do we even have to go into the office before? Why do we have to travel into a city and then work at an office when we were just doing this tech stuff and then going home again? Now, there is stuff for the team, and that's important, but how much, and then how much for each role? And now I think so much through COVID is people have really reevaluated that value. And I think that's been a word that we've mentioned a few times now, the joy and the value of, you know what, my family and my lifestyle and other things are more important than I possibly previously even acknowledged. And now how do I get it all? You mentioned before that you want to get it all, but not at the same time. Tell me a little bit about that.
Right. It was that you can have it all, not always at the same time. And so for me, that's come with significant trade-offs and compromises I've made over the years. So one, and they're going to both be an intersection between professional and my children. So the first is I can think of with my younger child, I went back to work almost immediately after giving birth, and that was just what was happening at work at the time. And going back to the men are not questioned for that, women are. So like, how can you be back at work already within a matter of weeks or whatever it was? But shortly afterwards, I traveled pretty significantly. When my younger one was 2 years old, I spent 220 days on the road that year. That's approximately how many business days there are, not including, all the vacation I could have taken and didn't. And that was a choice. And I worked for a company. We'd IPO'd and we acquired 6 companies, and I was all around North America. And so that was what was required. And I felt my own guilt. I didn't need other people to, weigh me down with it. But that was a choice I made for career, and it had an impact on my family. However, many years later, 10 years ago, my ex passed away from a second bout of cancer. And although we were divorced at the time, we had shared custody of our children, and my ex would always watch the children when I traveled. And I was in a job, I was working for American Express. I'd only been there a little over a year at the time when I was married to a woman, now married to a man, when she passed away. And I had a choice. I could move the children to New York, which didn't solve for all my travel issues, and take them out of an environment after already losing a parent that they knew well and felt some comfort in. Or I could change roles and in potentially companies. And I ended up leaving. I loved that job. So after 6 months of trying to make it work, I left. Yeah. And I moved back to a Toronto-based job, which is where my ex and I had shared a home and the children were living, in a job that had me traveling maybe 10% of the time. But it was the right move for my children. That job didn't, at the time, initially didn't bring me as much either compensation or satisfaction as I had felt in that prior role. But that was the right decision at that time for my family. So I give sort of examples of, at one point, it's not that I chose career over family, but I made some choices that had an impact on family. And in another instance, I chose the right thing for my family over my career. Yeah. So that for me is around having it all, not always at the same time, or different machinations of what all looks like at that time.
Yeah. Wow. That must have been such an incredibly challenging, heartbreaking time for you. Wow. Absolutely huge. Particularly at a young age, that's just huge. And that's a hard time for, a woman, and a mum, you're making those decisions. That's right. How are you feeling at that time? How are your kids feeling? And making those decisions, they're hard decisions. They're such hard decisions. And I know our listeners will be just like, wow, that's right. These are choices that you have to make. And I do love that you've shared that, though, because, that's right. There are times that you go, you know what, I am going to be intentionally, making this decision. And other people might say it's selfish. And you know what? Maybe it is, because, this is my life. I'm allowed to be selfish, and I'm making this choice because it is the right choice for me. And there are consequences on others, and I'm happy to live with those. Other times you go, you know what, I can't be that selfish at this time, because other kids, particularly children at that time, their needs need to be really recognized and valued, and there's choices that are hard, and so I think a lot of our audience might identify with, you always feel like you need to be having forward steps, and sometimes it's actually really refreshing to have this conversation today, because sometimes you go, professionally it was probably might have even been a stall or even a backward step. Might have been because of the remuneration, it might have been because of the opportunities, but that's okay. You know, it's all right to go, I've considered it all and I've made this choice because it's the right thing to do. And then, you know what, the success will still follow. And I think that's what our listeners need to appreciate, you know, and I've had that. I've raised 5 children, including 2 sets of twins. And so it was it was crazy. I did 3 degrees around all this to C-suite, a crazy journey. But some of it was, you know, criticized to what are you, you know, who's looking after your children? How are you doing that? And other times it's like, no, I've got to take a break. I've got to recalibrate, rebalance, and not make choices that I wanted to personally, because it's not always about just you, right? So I think these conversations are so important. I think these books, such as the books that you're putting out, are so important, because I think modern, you know, employees, women, particularly on this program, need to appreciate that, you know, it's a time to be more real, time to be having these conversations, a time to appreciate that there are real challenges. So for you now, moving forward, what are you most excited about? What is going to give you joy and value?
So I'm looking for that next C-suite role, and I'm very committed to making sure that it's in an organization where I can build the kind of workplace and culture that I describe in the book, that I have aimed to build to the extent that I can. Most of the last 15 years have been in Fortune 100 companies for me, and harder to move the needle, although still an executive in those firms.
Yeah.
Harder to move all of the organization to where I want it to be around some of the culture and leadership pieces. So I'm looking for that next role where that I'm coming in as the CEO or a solid number 2, and I'm at the helm, and there's a great alignment with that. And then also to continue to do the public speaking work that I do, a lot of which is around social justice, around advocacy, around sharing some of the adversity I've overcome, so people can maybe see a little bit of themselves in me and recognize that they can move through it to their own unstoppable version of whatever success looks like for them.
Yeah. I love that. And I'm sure that role is definitely going to reveal itself. I also love that, you know, you can be so clear in what you're looking for and you'll wait it out. You know, it's that you don't have to, often it's like, oh, okay, this will do. Well, whereas you get to your stages, you might do that earlier on, and there's nothing wrong with that. You know, an income's an income, right? But it's also important for people as they grow through their careers that sometimes you go, yeah, I totally know where I will be of most value to a company and what will be a complete fit. And I think that is so important, because that's it. Once you take that next step, you want to be all in. And you want to know that, you know, it's great excitement when you get a role, but it's like, will I actually really thrive in this role? And will I contribute to the best of my ability? And will you have space to continue to grow, right? I also love the balance that you're creating for your situation. Like I do with speaking, with authoring, because that gives you the win-win, doesn't it? One, I can see that you just love speaking, and I think, you know, it'd be such an asset for anyone to have you as their keynote. But to be able to be in that space, and that's obviously something that you love and enjoy, but very much I can hear in your narrative, it's like that you can help others along their journey. And so I think that's really great. One area we haven't mentioned is social justice. You've mentioned that just in the wrap up. Tell us a little bit about why that is important to you and how you speak about that.
Maybe it's some of the experience I've had as a woman, as a member of the LGBT community, of having very close friends that are Black and brown, or Indigenous persons, and just them not having the opportunity. I recognize I have great privilege as a white woman born in Canada, now living in the US.
Yeah.
With that comes and I'm an executive and a speaker. So I have a platform, and there's power that comes with that. And so for me, I want to advocate for equal rights for all. I'm, you know, living in a country currently that's, you know, repealed abortion access. You know, so I want to, you know, just be the one advocating again for equal rights, for human rights, and a much more just world for us to live in. And like I said, I feel like I have a platform and some power to do that, but it also comes from a place of often feeling like I was different and on the outside. And so I'm going to take that, coupled with privilege and power and platform, and bring it much more broadly.
I love that. I love that. And yes, you should. I think any of us who know we're in a privileged situation because of the color that we were born with, the place that we were born in, the environment and the experiences that we've had, the financial support that we've had. There's so many factors that go just because of the grace of God. You were in this situation when others weren't. So I think when you get to a position that you can influence change and really use your voice or your platform to be able to, bring more social justice to the world, to be able to bring other people on that journey with you as well. And to then hopefully, the maturity of that is to bring other people into that platform and have their voices heard, their situations heard, so that we actually get a breadth of humanity, which is what I love on this show, that I get people from all around the world. And it doesn't matter, what their color of skin is, their religion, their mindset, thinking, their sexual preferences. We don't care. We're just women doing life, women doing business, and sharing our stories. And so I really thank you for being such a fantastic guest on our show today. Wish you all the best with your upcoming books and your next career position, and the speaking opportunities and all the things that are coming for you. It's feeling like it's here we are just having this interview at the beginning of a new year. So it's going to be a super exciting year ahead for you. And for all of our listeners too, this is an opportunity for you. We're in 2024. What are you going to do in 2024? What does that look like for you? What should you be progressing? What if you sort of held back on that? You go, you know what, this might be my time to really push myself and go and make a big, brave, bold decision. Whether it's a career elevation, whether it's starting your own business, maybe you've been doing too much of that and you need to pull back and actually just get that, equilibrium happening again. Wherever you're at this situation, you definitely want to be reading books. And I'm a publisher. I'm all about that. You want to be reading books that are going to inspire and empower you and be learning from other women. So I'm really thrilled to have all of our beautiful listeners, people watching also on YouTube and LinkedIn Live. Wonderful to have you join us. Make sure you add your comments in the chat. We would love to get back to you. We would love to connect with you. And so, pop your questions there and we will get back to you straight away. And so thank you so much for being on the program today, Victoria.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Women's Biz Podcast. I'm Annie Gibbins, founder and CEO of Women's Biz Global. And if you would like to fast track your future success, pop on over to womensbizglobal.com, where you can find out how our coaching, media and publishing opportunities are helping women just like you to become and be seen as the trusted authorities in their niche. Inquire today and start reining in the abundance you desire.